Hello everyone, welcome to IAS Papa. In this initiative of PYQ solving, I'll be taking the polity subject. In the polity subject, I have divided all the major PYQs into various themes. For example, we'll be starting with directive principle of state policy. Then we'll be looking into the question that have been asked from the preamble, then fundamental rights, the legislature, be it parliament or the state legislature. Then we'll be doing the constitution amendment, and so far and so forth. I have divided the whole PYQ series into various themes so that it is easy for you to understand that from directive principle of state policy as a particular topic from where the questions are asked. Same is the case with preamble, which is very important for your upcoming examination also. So in order to better understand the previous year question of the prelims examination, it's better that you approach all PYQs in a theme-wise manner, right? So let's start the discussion related to directive principle of state policy. So the first question that is asked in the year of 2021, that under the constitution, concentration of wealth violates what? Yes, everyone knows that we are discussing directive principle of state policy. So the answer has to be DPSP. But this question is also telling us that right to equality. Now, whenever you are solving the previous year question, it is not important that you only see the correct answer, that is B. But in order to better understand and in order to predict the examination of 2025, it is important that you should be knowing about all the options which are incorrect, right? First of all, concentration of wealth, everyone knows that it is under Article 39, right? It is under Article 39, which is talking about concentration of wealth should be reduced, and Article 39 was one of the premise for introducing the land reforms in India. If you remember that how land reforms were introduced, it was introduced on the pretext of Article 39. Is it clear? But directive principle of state policy, right? It extends from Article 36 to Article 51 of the Indian Constitution, right? It's not important for you to remember all the DPSP by the article number, but you should be knowing in detail about what DPSP is basically talking about. For example, you should be knowing that it is DPSP which is talking about social and economic justice. Already the question has been asked, whereas political democracy is being initiated by, or it is being represented in the fundamental rights and not in the directive principle of state policy. So it's my request that you please read all the directive principle of state policy and try to thoroughly understand that what DPSP is telling about. Basically, DPSP is nothing but it is telling that how a state can become a welfare state. What are the basic minimum standards that the state should follow in order to become the welfare state? So under DPSP, all the principles, all the guidelines, all the things that have been written from Article 36 to 51, they are just the guidelines. It means that a guideline is not enforceable by the court. Guideline is just a voluntary recommendation which the state, whenever they feel so, they must try to do it, right? So please remember that DPSP are not enforceable. Is it clear? But along with reading DPSP, you should be keeping in mind that what is the relationship between DPSP and the fundamental right, and what is the relationship between DPSP and preamble. What I mean here, that DPSP and fundamental right are talking about justice. DPSP is basically talking about economic plus social justice, whereas fundamental right is trying to ensure the political justice, right? Whereas in DPSP and preamble, again, you will find some sort of similarity. In preamble, we are talking about liberty. In preamble, we are talking about justice, equality. All the things are same here in the preamble also. So whenever you are reading such ideological topics, for example, DPSP, fundamental right and preamble, please try to ensure that you read it in a comparative way, so that if question is asked, that we are going to analyze in of the upcoming slide, right? If the question is asked, you should be remembering that what is the relationship between preamble, DPSP and the fundamental right. But for this question, our answer is directive principle of state policy. Right to equality, it is the part of Article 14, which is nothing but the fundamental right. Whereas article or right to freedom is basically talking about Article 19. Again, Article 19 and 21, when we'll be solving the fundamental right question, you need to ensure that you must be knowing most of the fundamental rights which the Supreme Court has given the judgment, to include them as the part of fundamental right. And last is concept of welfare. Now, concept of welfare is itself is nothing but the DPSP. So, the correct answer here is option number B. This is the question of 2021. Now, again, in 2020, again, I want to emphasize on this particular point that from DPSP, there is no need to remember all the article numbers. You must be knowing about what is the content, what is the concept behind the DPSP. For example, in India, separation of judiciary from executive is enjoyed by, right, it is under Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. In the Indian Constitution, only at one time this particular thing has been mentioned, that executive should be independent or should be separate from the judiciary. Is it clear? Now, the answer is directive principle of state policy. Now, in 2025 prelims, if the question is asked that there is separation of legislature from executive, it is provided in the Indian Constitution. What you are going to mark, is this statement correct or incorrect? Please try to understand that this statement is incorrect, because in India we are following the parliamentary form of democracy, where the legislature and the executive are overlapping. The DPSP is only talking about that executive should be independent or should be separate from the judiciary. It is not talking about that there should be separation of executive from the legislature. Again, the question can be framed on the same premise in the 2025 prelims. So please try to remember this particular point that you can draw from this particular question. The answer is option number B. But it is talking about preamble. Preamble is not in any way is talking about separation of judiciary from the executive. What is 7th schedule? What is 7th schedule? Basically, it is talking about federal division of powers. Federal division of powers means in 7th schedule, the Constitution of India, in order to maintain the federal structure in India, they have divided the power between union, state and concurrent, right? Where the subjects are mentioned on which only the union can make law. There are certain subjects which are mentioned in the list too, where the state can make law, and the idea of federalism is to achieve the national development. So there are certain subjects or certain area where both union and state have to come together to make laws for the national development. Is it clear? So this is the part of 7th schedule. And the conventional practice. No, this is not a conventional practice. It is the part of DPSP that the judiciary in India should be separate from executive. Is it clear? Again, in 2020, the question was framed on the similar lines that they shall be enforceable by courts. Right? Already in the 2015 prelims, they have asked this particular question. Again, they repeated the same question after 5 years. Right? So, you can understand that from polity as a subject, if you are solving the PYQs, you can have a guarantee that almost 5 to 6 questions you are able to solve just by understanding the previous year questions from polity. right? Because the idea in the constitution, it is being repeated again and again by the UPSC. Is it clear? So the first statement, already we have discussed in the 2015 prelims that this statement is wrong. They are not enforceable by court. So second statement in itself, they have given that they shall not be enforceable by any court. Similar thing was repeated in 2015. Now the principle laid down in this part are to influence the making of laws by the state. Now what is the meaning of this particular statement? While discussing the first question, I told you that DPSP are the standard. These are the standard for the state, right? To be welfare in nature. How you and I will come to know that the state which is, making the policies, which are making the laws, whether they are welfare in nature, right? So we can come to know that if any law, policy, program is made by the state, or state here means the parliament or the state legislature, whether they are welfare in nature or not, we come to know by reading Article 36 to 51 of the Indian Constitution, right? So the principles laid down in this part, they are to influence the making of the laws by the state, because they are the guidelines which are provided to the state that you should be making laws on certain principles, which is the part of DPSP. So the correct answer is option number D, that is 2 and 3rd statement are correct.